I'm Emily Carter. I'm 34 and last April I walked into my great-grandmother's study and found 42 empty display cases. My 10-year-old daughter Lily was still in the car finishing her peanut butter sandwich because I had told her to wait while I grabbed something quickly. I didn't grab anything. There was nothing left to grab. The room smelled the same as it always had: cedar polish, the faint metallic tang of old coins. But now the smell had nowhere to cling. My parents had sold every piece of my great-grandmother's rare coin collection, the one she'd left to Lily. They sold it for $18,000. They spent the money on a new kitchen for my sister's family, quartz countertops, stainless steel appliances, and a fancy espresso machine shaped like a vintage train. What I did in the next 10 days didn't involve a single raised voice, but it cost my parents the home they'd lived in for 28 years. And when I finally said the sentence that made my mother's teacup slip from her hand, my sister was recording on her phone. Welcome back to Quiet Justice Stories. This is where we tell the kind of revenge that doesn't shout, doesn't break things, and doesn't make you the villain. If you've ever had family treat an inheritance like it was theirs to sell, drop a comment below. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Let me tell you about Eleanor. Eleanor Carter was my great-grandmother. She was the first woman in our family to graduate college Radcliffe class of 1962 economics, and the last person in the Carter line who believed that promises were sacred. She built a modest fortune through smart investments and spent 30 years collecting rare U.S. coins, 18th century silver dollars, a 13 Liberty head nickel, a complete set of Morgan dollars from the Carson City Mint. 42 items in total cataloged, appraised, and displayed in the study of the family home in Millfield, Connecticut. In 2009, at 82 years old, Eleanor established the Eleanor Carter Heritage Collection Foundation, a 501c3, tax-exempt, federally registered with the Connecticut Secretary of State. The coins were formally transferred to the foundation and placed on permanent loan. They stayed inside the family house, and in exchange, the house received a conditional tax exemption. That exemption saved roughly $25,000 a year in property taxes. The deal had one condition: the coins had to stay in the house unsold and be passed to the next direct descendant. In 2018, 2 years before she died, Eleanor added a final amendment. She named my daughter Lily as the sole beneficiary. Lily was 4 at the time. Eleanor sat her on her lap in the old leather armchair by the window, pulled out a 1921 peace dollar, the first coin she'd ever bought, and said, "These are yours now, sweetheart. You'll keep them safe." On the inside of every display case was Eleanor's engraved plaque with a line in her handwriting underneath, "For Lily, who will guard them well." Lily would press her finger to that line every time she visited the study. It was her ritual. She never skipped it. My mother had been circling the collection for over a year. It started with small comments. At Thanksgiving dinner in 2023, while Lily sat across the table coloring, she said, "Those coins are just sitting there collecting dust in that old room." I remember the exact moment, because Lily looked up from her coloring book, held my mother's gaze for a long second, then went back to her picture without a word. My daughter was 9. She already knew what my mother was doing. After Thanksgiving, the comments came more often. "Honey, have you thought about what to do with all those old coins? Sarah's kids would love that study someday. They could turn it into a playroom. Your father's hips can't handle those stairs anymore. Maybe we should renovate." I gave the same answer every time. "They're not mine, Mom. They're on permanent loan to Lily." And my mother always gave the same smile, the tight one, the one that meant she'd heard me and decided I was wrong. Here's what I didn't understand until it was too late. My mother's fixation on the coins wasn't about money. It was about Eleanor. 14 years earlier, Eleanor had rewritten her will. She skipped my mother entirely, skipped my father, left the estate, the house, the foundation, the collection, directly to me, and after me to Lily. My mother had married into the Carter family at 23, pregnant and scared. She had raised 2 daughters in that house. She had hosted 28 Thanksgivings, and Eleanor's will said in the politest legal language possible that Margaret Carter was not a Carter by blood. That wound never healed. It just grew sharper. 3 months before we left for our annual beach trip, my brother-in-law Mark posted anonymously on a coin collectors forum, looking for a reputable dealer for high-end U.S. rare coins. Discreet inquiry. I saw the post. I recognized his username. I thought it was a coincidence. That was my first mistake. Every Saturday, I drove Lily 35 minutes from our apartment in New Haven to the family house in Millfield. My parents lived there full-time. They had for nearly 3 decades. We visited the study. That was the arrangement. Lily had unrestricted access to the collection, and my parents had the $25,000 annual tax break that came with housing it. Lily had a routine. She'd walk straight through the front hall without greeting anyone, push open the study door with her shoulder, and go to the third display case on the left wall. That's where the 1921 peace dollar lived, the first coin Eleanor had ever bought. She'd stand on her tiptoes, peer through the glass, then turn to me with that serious look she got when she was thinking hard. "Mom, can I hold it today?" she'd ask, even though she already knew the answer. The coins were too valuable to handle without supervision, but she loved to look. Sometimes she'd press her palm against the glass, right over the plaque with Eleanor's handwriting. "For Lily, who will guard them well." Then she'd move down the line, counting each case, making sure all 42 were still there. She never missed one. Not once in 3 years. The week before we left for our beach trip, Eleanor's voice came back to me the way it sometimes did. Not a memory, but a sentence that arrived uninvited. "The coins are Lily's birthright. Don't let anyone take them from her." I thought about calling my mother and saying something firm, something about Mark's forum post, about the measuring tape he'd been running along the study walls at Easter while he thought nobody was watching. I didn't call. I told myself it was professional detachment. It was cowardice. The two look identical, until the display cases are empty. The Millfield Historical Society runs a 10-day staff retreat every April at a beach house in Old Saybrook. I'd been attending since my 3rd year as head curator. This year, I brought Lily. She packed 3 library books, a sketch pad, and a box of colored pencils sharpened to perfect points. She did not bring any of the rare coins. She never removed them from the study. That was part of the stewardship Eleanor had taught her. You visit the coins. You don't relocate them. You are the one who travels. My mother offered to check on the house while we were gone, water the plants, bring in the mail, make sure the basement pump didn't fail. I said, "That would be wonderful." She texted the night we left, "Have fun, sweetheart. We've got everything handled here." I read that message 3 times, sitting on the deck with my coffee, watching Lily build a sandcastle with a moat so elaborate it would have impressed a medieval engineer. Something about the phrasing nagged at me. Everything handled. Not "the house looks fine," or "we'll keep an eye on things." Everything handled like a checklist with all boxes ticked, not a favor in progress. I told myself I was overanalyzing a text message. My profession is overanalyzing documents, provenance, authentication, the difference between what words say and what people mean. Sometimes a text is just a text. That was my second mistake. We spent 10 days without cell service. Lily finished all 3 library books by day 6 and started filling her sketch pad with seashells she collected from the shore. On the 8th night, lying in her sleeping bag with a flashlight still on, she said something I've thought about every day since. "Mom, I think Great would have liked this beach." I cried into my pillow after she fell asleep. My daughter talked about a woman who'd been dead for 4 years the way most children talk about someone they'd seen yesterday. We drove home on a Friday, 10 days without a proper shower, 1 completed sketchbook, and a sunburn across my shoulders from the deck chair. I told Lily we'd stop at the family house on the way back to New Haven so she could see the peace dollar before bedtime. She said okay, without looking up from a sketch of a hermit crab she was shading with her favorite seafoam green pencil. The drive from Old Saybrook to Millfield takes about an hour and a half through the Connecticut countryside. I used the silence to mentally catalog what needed doing at work. The new exhibit on colonial currency, the conservation report due, the donor thank you letters that needed signatures. When we pulled into the driveway at 3:45 in the afternoon, the porch light was on. The mail was stacked against the front door 6 days' worth. My parents' car wasn't in the driveway. I texted my mother. No response. I texted my father. Nothing. I used the spare key from under the loose brick by the steps, the one Eleanor had put there in 1985, and no one had ever moved. The house was clean, unusually clean. Vacuum tracks on the hallway runner, fresh and precise. A lemon-scented candle burning on the kitchen counter, the one my mother only lit when she was trying to cover another smell. I walked toward the study. The hallway was 12 steps. I knew because I'd been counting them since I was 5, and when you grow up in a house with a coin collection, counting becomes a reflex. The study door was ajar. The overhead light was on. Eleanor had insisted on soft lamps, only overhead light could fade the display backdrops over time. Someone had flipped the switch and walked away. I stepped inside. The room smelled like dust and lemon. Not cedar, not polish, not the faint metallic tang of old coins. The display cases were empty. I counted them. I don't know why that was my first instinct, but it was the curator in me, I suppose, needing to quantify before I could process. Case A1 through F7, 42 slots, every one of them bare. Dust outlines where the coins had been. Faint circles of cleaner glass where the display lights had preserved the surfaces. The old leather armchair sat by the window exactly where it had always been. But the light falling across its cushion looked wrong, too bright, too uninterrupted. No coins in the cases to cast shadows. On the seat cushion was a folded invoice. Hartwell & Sons, Rare Coins, New York. Dated 6 days earlier. Total, 18,000 seller, Richard Carter. I picked it up. My hands were shaking, so I set it on the arm of the chair and read it flat. My father had initialed every page. My mother had witnessed on page 3. The transaction included full photographic, documentation, provenance verification, and a certified check deposited into their joint account at Millfield. Trust, 18,000, for 42 coins that did not belong to them. Heard small footsteps on the hardwood behind me. Lily was standing in the doorway. She looked past me at the empty cases the way you look at a room in a dream, recognizing the shape of it, but not the emptiness. I stepped sideways to block her view. "Honey, go back to the car, please." I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She didn't move. Her eyes found the third case on the left wall, the spot where the 1921 peace dollar had lived for 12 years. Then she turned around and walked back down the hallway. She didn't cry. She didn't ask a question. 10 years old, and she knew before I said a single word. I sat in the armchair. The leather was cold. I did not cry either. I was already counting other things. Invoices, deeds, dates, and the number of days it would take to get every coin back in every case. My parents came home at 6:30 that evening carrying shopping, bags from Williams-Sonoma and a bottle of wine from a vineyard in the Hudson Valley. My mother was wearing new earrings, small diamond studs I'd never seen before. My father was whistling something. They walked in smiling. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my hands folded and the invoice from Hartwell & Sons underneath my left palm. Lily was in the living room with her sketchbook drawing nothing. "Mom, where are the coins?" I asked. My mother set the shopping bags on the counter. She tilted her head the way she does when she's about to explain something she considers too obvious for discussion. "Oh, sweetheart, they were just sitting there collecting dust in that old room. Mark found such a nice dealer in New York. We did everyone a favor." She said it with the satisfied calm of a woman who believed she'd solved a problem nobody else had the courage to address. "Sarah's kids are going to have the most incredible kitchen. We even got that espresso machine you like, the one shaped like a train." My father uncorked the wine. "Honey, those coins weren't doing anyone any good just sitting in there." I looked at him. "Did you read the plaque inside any of the cases?" My mother waved her hand. "Eleanor's little notes. Sweetie, she's been gone 4 years. It's time to live in the present." I looked at the wine glass my father was filling. I looked at the shopping bags. I estimated the cost of my mother's new earrings against the balance of 18,000 minus a kitchen renovation and a train-shaped espresso machine. Then I stood up. "Thank you for dinner," I said. I walked to the living room, picked up Lily's jacket, and said, "Let's go, honey." We drove home in the dark. I did not raise my voice. I did not slam the door. I closed it the way you close a display case you intend to come back to. The drive from Millfield to New Haven takes 45 minutes on I-95. Lily fell asleep before the first exit. She woke up at the third, rubbing her eyes with the back of her hand. "Mom," she said, her voice thick with sleep. "Did Grandma sell them?" "Yes, honey." She was quiet. I watched the dashboard clock because it was the only light in the car and I couldn't stop tracking things. 2 minutes of silence. "Then did she sell the peace dollar?" "I think so. But I'm going to find them. All of them. All of them. All of them." "Okay." She turned toward the window and pressed her forehead against the glass. That night, after Lily fell asleep clutching a library book instead of her great-grandmother's peace dollar, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the folder. Inside was a document I hadn't read in 5 years. The permanent loan deed, 18 pages, 3 signatures, and 1 clause that was about to cost my parents everything. It was 2:30 a.m. Lily was asleep down the hall, her sketchbook open on the nightstand to a half-finished drawing of a coin she'd never hold again. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car horn from the street below. I had the foundation charter open on my laptop, the PDF I'd saved in 2014, the year Eleanor signed the original deed. Next to the laptop, a printout of IRS Publication 561 on qualified appraisals and recapture provisions. Next to that, the Hartwell & Sons website, featuring a tasteful photo of Charles Hartwell standing before a wall of display cases with his arms crossed and the expression of a man who had spent 35 years handling objects that outlast their owners, 40 miles north. The leather armchair sat empty in the Millfield study. I could feel its absence. I know that sounds irrational for a woman who catalogs provenance records for a living, but that chair had held 4 generations of Carter women. Eleanor teaching my grandmother about numismatics, my grandmother teaching my mother teaching me, and me teaching Lily. It was the only piece of furniture in the house that mattered, and it was sitting in a room that no longer had any reason to exist. I opened the permanent loan deed. 18 pages, notarized by the state of Connecticut, filed with the Secretary of State's office, bearing the foundation seal and 3 signatures: Eleanor Carter, Harold Green, and Martha Pike, Foundation Counsel. Section 4 described the collection. Section 5 described the conditions. Section 6 named the beneficiary, Lily Carter, age 6 at time of amendment, with lifetime access and veto authority over any disposition. Section 7 was titled Recapture. I read it twice. Then a third time because the numbers were large enough to require verification. Any unauthorized disposition of the collection by any party other than the named beneficiary shall constitute a recapture event, triggering full back tax assessment for all years of conditional exemption with statutory interest and 50% penalty. I picked up my phone and composed an email to Harold Green, Foundation Chair. Subject line, permanent loan breach. Body, Harold, we have a situation. Call me at 7. The collection has been sold. I hit send at 2:47 a.m. and did not sleep for the rest of the night. Harold called at 6:58. He did not say good morning. He said, Emily, what happened? I told him in under 3 minutes. He listened without interrupting. Harold had been Eleanor's closest friend for 45 years and the Foundation's chair since its incorporation. He did not waste words. He did not comfort me. When I finished, he was quiet for 5 seconds. Then he said, Pull up the deed, Section 7. I already have it open. Good. Read me the recapture provision. I read it aloud the way I read everything, evenly, without emphasis, letting the language carry its own weight. When I finished, Harold said, Your parents owe the IRS roughly $320,000. Back taxes from 2014 through today, plus statutory interest at the federal rate, plus the 50% penalty for unauthorized disposition of conditionally exempt property. That's the federal number. On the state side, they lose the conditional exemption going forward. That's another $25,000 a year in property taxes that the town of Millfield will now assess at full market value. And because the exemption was tied to in situ preservation, the IRS will place a federal tax lien on the property for the full amount owed. Between the lien, the back taxes, and the new annual assessment, keeping the house becomes financially impossible. They'll have to sell it to cover what they owe. And the coins? Foundation property. We have first right of clawback under Section 9. If Hartwell cooperates, he refunds and returns. If he doesn't, Martha files in federal court by Monday. I wrote everything down on a yellow legal pad, not the laptop. Paper doesn't crash, and paper doesn't sync to a cloud my mother might access through my father's shared account. Harold was the only person alive who could say $320,000 the way other people say pass the salt. He gave me the numbers, the deadlines, and the next 3 steps. That was better than sympathy. Collecting dust, I thought. $320,000 of dust. At 9:14 the following morning, I called Hartwell & Sons from the parking lot of the Millfield Library. A receptionist transferred me. Charles Hartwell picked up on the second ring. His voice was measured and unhurried. the voice of a man who had spent 4 decades handling objects worth more than most people's houses and had learned never to sound surprised. Mr. Hartwell. My name is Emily Carter. I'm the vice chair of the Eleanor Carter Heritage Collection Foundation. You recently purchased 42 items from my parents, Richard and Margaret Carter. A brief pause. Yes, Richard Carter brought a full inventory, tagged, appraised. We completed the transaction in person at the family residence last Wednesday. Have any been resold? Not yet. We catalog before listing, standard practice for a collection of this quality. We're still photographing the Morgan dollars. Mr. Hartwell, those items are on permanent loan from a 501c3 foundation. They are foundation property, not personal assets. Section 7 of the permanent loan deed triggers a clawback provision at unauthorized disposition. I'm formally requesting return. Silence. 4 seconds. I counted because I count everything now. Ms. Carter, I'd like to see that deed. I'll be in New York by 5 this evening with the original. Another pause. 2 seconds. Drive safely. I hung up and sat in the parking lot with the engine running. My hands were steady. 14 years of handling irreplaceable artifacts teaches you something useful. The most important phone call of your life should sound exactly like every other phone call you've ever made. No tremor in the voice. No urgency in the phrasing. State the facts. Name the mechanism. Offer the evidence. Let the other person connect the dots. I pulled out of the lot and drove home to pick up Lily. I wasn't going to leave my daughter in New Haven while I drove to Manhattan. She was coming with me. She was going to see her coins, and she was going to watch her mother get them back. Interstate 95, south, 2 hours and 15 minutes to Manhattan. Lily sat in the back seat with a library copy of The Mysterious Benedict Society. The permanent loan deed sat in a manila envelope on the passenger seat. 18 pages that weighed less than a sandwich and more than anything else in the car. Somewhere past New Rochelle, Lily looked up from her book. Mom, what's clawback? It's when something goes back to its real owner. Like lost puppies. Sometimes like lost puppies. She considered this for a moment. Mom, why didn't you tell Grandma about the foundation thing before she sold the coins? Because I thought if I never said it out loud, she'd never do anything that made me have to. No, honey, it wasn't. That was the first time in her life my daughter told me I wasn't smart. And the first time I agreed with her, I'd spent 5 years avoiding confrontation with my mother. 5 years of burying myself in exhibits and conservation reports and catalog entries because coins don't argue back. Don't give you the silent treatment for weeks. Don't tell you you're being ungrateful for protecting what a dead woman left your daughter. Professional detachment. That's the polite name for what I had. The real name is cowardice, dressed in a blazer and white cotton gloves. Eleanor's voice again, arriving the way it does. The coins are Lily's birthright. Don't let anyone take them from her. I hadn't forgotten. I'd just been too quiet about remembering. Somewhere around the Bronx, Lily fell asleep with the book open on her chest, page 127, face down against her sweater. I drove the remaining 30 minutes listening to the hum of the highway and thinking about the word stewardship. Eleanor used it the way other people used the word love. Carefully, specifically, and only when she meant it. I was 34, and just beginning to understand what it cost. If you've ever realized that protecting what's yours sometimes means facing the people who took it, drop a comment with the word steward. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens when we walk into Hartwell & Sons. Hartwell & Sons occupied the 3rd floor of a narrow brownstone on East 57th Street. Mahogany paneling, brass reading lamps, gallery lighting angled to make every coin gleam. Charles Hartwell met us at the door. 65, silver-haired, reading glasses on a chain, with a handshake that told you he'd been appraising rare coins longer than I'd been alive. He looked at Lily. She's welcome, I said. She's the beneficiary. He nodded once and led us to the cataloging room. Climate-controlled, 68 degrees, 45% humidity. I knew without asking, because those are the numbers every numismatist carries in their head the way doctors carry blood pressure ranges. The 42 coins were arranged across 3 long tables under soft overhead lights. Each piece had a yellow sticky note with a temporary catalog number written in Hartwell's precise hand. He walked us along the tables without speaking. Lily found it on the 2nd table, the 1921 peace dollar, her favorite. She didn't touch it at first. just stood there staring through the glass of its temporary display case. Then she looked up at me, her eyes wide. "Mom, it's here," I nodded. "All of them are." She turned back to the coin, then to the plaque inside the case. Eleanor's handwriting. "For Lily, who will guard them well." She pressed her palm against the glass, right over the words, the way she always did with the original display cases. Then she looked at Hartwell, standing 2 feet behind her, and said quietly, "This one's mine." Hartwell's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. He looked at me. "Every single one has the plaque, hand engraved, with the same dedication to your daughter." He paused. "That level of personalization is unusual. Mr. Carter didn't mention any of this when he brought them in." I know he didn't. I placed the deed on the cataloging table. Hartwell sat down, put on his glasses, and read for 8 minutes. "I know because Lily counted the coins on the table, twice, and I counted the seconds on the wall clock behind his head." Neither of us spoke. When he finished, he removed his glasses, set them beside the deed, and said, "Ms. Carter, I purchased stolen foundation property." "Not stolen," I said. "Sold by people who didn't legally own it. There's a difference for you. There isn't one for my parents." He stood, walked to a gray filing cabinet behind the cataloging desk, and pulled out the purchase contract. 4 pages. My father's driver's license photocopy on page 1. My mother's signature as witness on page 4. An itemized inventory with a Polaroid of every coin valued above $2,000 on page 3. And in each Polaroid, visible in the lower left corner of the open display case, Eleanor's plaque. "For Lily, who will guard them well." Hartwell slid the entire file across the table with both hands. Purchase contract. Inventory sheets, Polaroids, gift receipts. 3 centimeters of paper documenting my parents' $180,000 mistake. "I'll hold the coins here for 14 days while you file," he said. "Make it 21, I replied. "I want the IRS to issue the subpoena before shipment so the chain of custody stays unbroken." He looked at me the way one curator looks at another when they realize they've been speaking the same language all along. Smart. I drove home that night with 3 centimeters of paper on the passenger seat and a sleeping 10-year-old who, somewhere around the Tappan Zee Bridge, whispered mine without opening her eyes. The voicemail started the next morning. 4:02 a.m. Sarah. "Emily, Mom called me crying. Whatever you're planning, stop it. Tyler is so excited about the new kitchen. He's a child. You're going to ruin his birthday over a bunch of old coins. Call me back now. 8:14 a.m. My mother. Honey, I know you're upset, but we need to talk about this like adults. Don't make it bigger than it is. 9:01 a.m. A text from Mark. You are being ridiculous about this. No apostrophe. No period." I screenshot all 3 and forwarded them to Harold. He replied in 37 seconds. "Document everything. Don't engage." I spent the morning at the Millfield Library doing exactly what I do every weekday. Cataloging, preserving, filing. The only difference was that between entries, I was also drafting a personal affidavit describing the discovery, the Hartwell invoice, my mother's admission at dinner, and the visit to Manhattan. Harold was meeting me at 2 p.m. Harold had been Eleanor's lawyer for 12 years. He had drafted the original deed clause by clause, arguing with Eleanor over semicolons at midnight and losing every time. He knew the document because he'd built it. At 2:15, sitting across from him in his office above the Millfield post office, I slid my affidavit and the Hartwell file across his desk. He read it the way lawyers read, methodically, pen in hand, tiny illegible notes in the margins. When he finished, he looked up. "How do you want to handle this?" "I want the coins returned. I want the IRS notified, and I want my parents to understand what they've done in a room full of people with the deed in their hands." He wrote something on his legal pad. "Sarah's throwing a kitchen unveiling party next Saturday. 30 guests." He set his pen down. "That'll do. If you've ever watched someone realize they've just handed you the perfect opportunity to reclaim what's yours, drop a comment with the word party. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens when Emily walks into that kitchen with a folder and a daughter who knows exactly what was stolen from her.